Story 1. If I needed a paternity test, I wouldn't ask. I would simply arrange for one discreetly. Furthermore, if I had enough suspicion to bring it up with her, I would have left and validated it later during child support and custody hearings. What you are expressing is essentially, I suspect you cheated and feel confident enough to go on record. If you believe they cheated to that extent, why are you still in the relationship? Story 2. Assuming you are regularly around the current child, which I would assume given that the mother may have become pregnant by you again, you can simply take the test. The mother does not need to be involved. Story 3. It entirely depends on the circumstances. Wanting a paternity test can be seen by her as an indication of distrust from her partner, which can be hurtful and cause her to react defensively, regardless of whether there has been infidelity. However, if you have genuine cause to believe there has been infidelity and that the child is not yours, then I would recommend suspending wedding planning as a bare minimum. Story 4. As someone who recently discovered in their 30s that my father is not my biological father, I would just do it myself. Story 5. The fact that you are in a situation where you need to ask your fiancé for a paternity test is not a good sign. This is a losing situation regardless of the outcome. Clearly, you do not trust her, and her refusal only reinforces that distrust. If she takes the test and the child isn't yours, it confirms that she cheated. If the child is yours, you may create a deep emotional wound that she might never heal from. Since you do not trust her, it raises the question, why are you still with her? Story 6. Not long ago, there was a post by a woman who had been completely faithful to her husband. One of his friends or relatives put it in his head that the baby might not be his and that he needed to get a paternity test. He essentially forced her into taking a paternity test. She knew she had been completely faithful, and there was no chance of the baby being anyone else's. The same day she gave him the DNA results, she served him with divorce papers. Keep in mind that asking her about trust implicitly suggests that you do not trust her and that you suspect she has been unfaithful. There are situations where such suspicion is warranted. However, if that is not the case, you risk damaging your relationship. Even if she does not leave you over it now, this will always linger in your minds as a couple and could be viewed in the future as the beginning of the end of your relationship. Story 7. Either way, you are breaking up. If you accuse someone of cheating, there is obviously a lack of trust. If you are correct, then why would you stay with them? If they were faithful, why would they remain with you after such an accusation? Story 8. What a strange request. I wouldn't have asked for one in the first place, so I wouldn't be requesting a second one. We need more information to provide accurate advice on this matter. Story 9. To everyone advising him to proceed regardless, I believe he wants a decision before the child is born in order to know whether to put his name on the birth certificate. He also wants to ensure that if they separate, he will not be financially responsible for the child. I completely understand his perspective. However, if he has such a lack of trust in his fiancée, why are they still planning to get married? That is my question. Story 10. In neither outcome would asking lead to a better result than not asking. You're either telling a woman that you do not trust her or that she should not trust you. This is not a good way to start a marriage. Story 11. If I am genuinely concerned that my partner is not having a child that shares DNA with me, then I would argue that the relationship is broken. Story 12. I would never call my partner inappropriate names or demand a paternity test, because we have a relationship built on trust and love. How are so many of you marrying women you don't trust or believe are unfaithful? If there were even the slightest chance I would need to ask for a paternity test, I wouldn't be marrying her in the first place. Story 13. Why would she refuse him the right to know with certainty that it is his child? Why would she feel it is her privilege alone? To me, that is a significant red flag worthy of parting ways. Story 14. OP is not telling us the full story, and we have many questions about the situation. Why do you want a paternity test? Story 15. Get your own paternity test. If you accuse her of cheating and you are wrong, it will be very difficult to recover from that. Story 16. Why do you feel you need one? As a woman, I would be quite upset if my partner needed a paternity test every time I got pregnant. I don't know if I would outright refuse, but unless you have a reason, this seems odd. Story 17. If someone needs a paternity test, the relationship is already over. Trust is broken, so it is best to get the test while acknowledging that the relationship has ended. She may be slower in accepting this than you were. Give her time to process the breakup. Hopefully, co-parenting can be worked out. Story 18. Honestly, there's no winning. If she did not cheat, she would feel accused. If she did cheat, she would behave similarly, and you wouldn't be able to distinguish right from wrong. Ironically, you might have better luck maintaining a relationship with the person who cheated because they are more likely to want your financial support and involvement in the child's life. The person who didn't cheat might have more reasons by principle to consider it best if you were out of her and the child's life, from her perspective, not yours, not a neutral third party, and not an all-knowing being. Story 19. Well, since the first one wasn't mine and I am sterile, a second one would raise further questions. Especially the question, why are you telling me about this? Since I am no longer with her. Story 20. Who cares about our reaction to your situation? You know what time it is. If you don't know, check your watch. Story 21. Why are you marrying someone you trust so little that you want a paternity test? Why marry someone who refuses to allow it? There are significant concerns here. Story 22. She is your fiancé. I assume you have been having regular intimacy. I assume your relationship is meant to be exclusive. I assume you love and trust her enough to have proposed. Why are you asking for a paternity test? If you believe she is being unfaithful, the relationship is over, and you should get the paternity test to avoid paying child support for someone else's child. If you have no reason to think she is unfaithful, then I would not demand a paternity test. Story 23. It depends on the reason I want the test done. In general, I would probably get a court-appointed test if it could relieve me of child support in case she cheated. However, if the reason is that I feel more comfortable with certainty, even though I do not suspect her of cheating, I would communicate that with my fiancé before having unprotected sex. I want to ensure that no children are born before a paternity test is completed for every child from our union. Story 24. I can't understand refusing paternity tests. Why not embrace the opportunity to prove the truth if there is any doubt? Story 25. Either wait until the child is born and do it yourself, or leave now if you are questioning your situation so much. Story 26. I can't remember if someone told me this during my 10 years of bartending or if I saw it posted online, but I remember a story about a couple who had a son with some serious health problems. They took the child to the doctor, and it emerged that the father could not be the biological parent due to a hereditary genetic condition he did not possess. The mother insisted she had not been unfaithful, claiming her love for him and her fidelity. Despite her assurances, the husband left, faced with undeniable evidence. Years passed without him seeing the child after the divorce, and both their lives became chaotic, with the mother still insisting she had never cheated. A few years later, the child faced another medical issue requiring a bone marrow transplant, so they tested the mother for compatibility. It turned out the child was not biologically related to her either. The baby had been switched at the hospital during birth. This reinforces my belief that everyone should consider paternity tests. Story 27. I was so confused reading this. Fiancé refers to a male who is engaged, while fiancée refers to a female who is engaged. I was wondering why the man was refusing to take a paternity test. Story 28. Always get a paternity test. I don't understand why so many people are giving such poor opinions. Paternity is critically important, and men have a right to know if they are the father. Expecting men to simply accept that responsibility is unreasonable. If you are not the father, you could be obligated to support another man's child for 18 years. This can be life-altering. Trust but verify. Story 29. It depends. If you asked me for a paternity test when I knew there was no reason for doubt, I would not only be offended, I would be angry. I would also refuse, as it suggests ongoing mistrust and that I have to defend every move I make. However, if there were any reasons to suspect foul play, like previous instances of cheating or opportunity, I would probably agree to the test just to regain his trust. But I would also tell him, I know the truth and I'm telling you now, don't do this again because it's deeply insulting. If you can't trust me, we can't be together. Story 30. Buy some condoms, dude. At this point, if you don't trust her, why are you getting married? Story 31. A woman refusing a paternity test is a major red flag. The only valid reason to refuse is concern about paternity. If the child is born, I would handle it independently. If the child is not born, I would walk away. Since you have one of each, the situation is complicated. Story 32. Well, I had a vasectomy 3 years ago, but even before that, I am not signing anything until a child is proven to be mine. If she wants to get mad at anyone, it better be at all the women who trick men. Story 33. Well, obviously the fiancé is upset that her loyalty and care for the relationship have been questioned and that she has been accused of infidelity. The question is, how can fathers be protected from false paternity cases? If we are blaming individuals for not dating or marrying someone they trust, we might as well start blaming abuse victims for choosing to have a relationship with someone who could be abusive. The rebuttal does not provide an alternative solution. Story 34. If it has gone this far and she is refusing the test, then I doubt she wants you to have that answer. There would be no saving that relationship for me. My only concern is that if the child is mine, I want my rights as the father to be protected. However, I would not stay in a relationship with that woman. Story 35. Take the kids, get the test, and be ready to leave when the test comes back. Speak to a lawyer before walking out the door. Depending on where you live, you may be charged with abandoning the marital home, even if you are not the father. Story 36. I don't know why people always ask the mother. Just get a test done privately if you are that worried. Story 37. You will need to get a paternity test done privately. Find a reputable agency. It may cost a little, but you won't need consent if you have the requisite DNA samples. If determining paternity is important to you, I understand your concerns. Open your wallet and let the process begin. Good luck. If you have a suspicion, it is likely correct. Story 38. Do it anyway. If the kids are yours, then what does she say? It's a cheek swab from both of you and you will know. Lay it on the line. Either she agrees or the wedding is off. Story 39. That would be suspicious if she doesn't give a solid reason. You don't need both parents for a paternity test. Story 40. Every time I have a child, I will take 2 different DNA tests on the child and myself on day 1. This will lower the chance of a wrong answer. I would do this without the mother knowing. Only if the tests come back negative would she find out. Of course, we would be going to court. Story 41. If you have the option to obtain the undeniable truth, why hide from it? I wouldn't let it get to that point. We will have that conversation before she gets pregnant, and our relationship will adjust accordingly. I am determined to get the test done because there is literally no downside to it. It is just a formality that I would prefer to complete. If someone sold you the most precious thing in life that you wanted and at the end offered you a free warranty, why would you ever decline it? There are plenty of situations in life where you do formalities and redundancies even though you feel confident about a situation because the consequences of things going wrong are too significant. Wearing seatbelts, double-checking doors are locked, checking bank statements, health checkups, and so on. These are all scenarios where you have no reason to believe things will go bad. Yet you check regardless of the tediousness because the consequences can be life-altering. Every man who had no signs of cancer advises others to get tested because you never know. And every man who had no signs of a cheating partner will say the same. I know it sounds a bit silly to most people, but to the small percentage of men who found themselves raising a child that wasn't theirs and didn't know it until years later, I would bet they wish someone recommended they check, as that was a major life-altering moment for them. All of this is why the moral debate over getting a paternity test just seems silly to me. Story 42. I didn't find out until later in our relationship, while she was still pregnant, that she had cheated on me multiple times around the time of conception and also on and off during her pregnancy. While we were at the hospital, I decided to have a paternity test done right then and there. Luckily, it turns out I was actually the father. Yes, she did cheat on me after she gave birth as well, almost on a regular basis. We are not together anymore. Story 43. This is why we marry the right person, who will not lie to us, who will not belittle us, who will not cheat on us, and who will not deceive us. We should not engage in sexual relations until we are married. Story 44. Distrust can lead to comments like, "You don't trust me." I have given this some thought, and trust isn't just a yes or no. It's a feeling that is earned based on behavior and actions, which never becomes completely solidified. You have every right to follow your instincts. It is part of our survival as human beings. If she doesn't like how you feel, that is her problem, not yours. I suggest you get that test. Hookup culture has negatively impacted relationships in Western society, and honor and respect are fading away. You can't be too careful these days. Story 45. I believe that if there was already suspicion regarding me, her refusal to take a paternity test would only intensify that suspicion. Personally, I am not sure I could trust her after that. Story 46. Do not put your name on the birth certificate until you take a paternity test that proves you are the father. Story 47. Why is anyone getting married if this is an option? Definitely do not get married prior to the birth because, at least in my home state, paternity has to be proven to avoid child support. The idea of marriage is confusing if someone thinks their partner is unworthy of trust. Story 48. Here's what you do. Punch her square in the middle of her stomach, ensuring she miscarries. No child, no problem. Story 49. Why first of all? Even asking her is unreasonable unless you have a reason to believe she is being unfaithful. It sounds like you are risking being an irresponsible father. Story 50. I was just thinking, what if a paternity test was standard practice on the day of the baby's birth and at 90 days of the baby's life? That would be a strong incentive for any mother to come clean beforehand. It would also help prevent hospital staff from making mistakes or deliberately swapping children. Story 51. If I had a reason to ask for a paternity test and she refused, I would proceed to obtain one without her consent. Story 52. I posed a similar question in a forum designed for women, and I received mixed responses. My question was whether a paternity test should be made mandatory before signing any documents to protect men from paternity fraud and future grief if the child isn't his. Some participants mentioned they would be offended, while others indicated that it would be an invasive procedure. A few argued it would be fair because women are certain that the child is theirs, and men should have the same right to certainty. Interestingly, the inspiration for my post came from a good friend who discovered that his second child wasn't his after 2 years. He had no reason to doubt the mother at the time of birth. He only found out when the biological father reappeared and revealed that he himself was unaware of having a child, which made it a roller coaster of an event. Story 53. It sounds to me like the wedding is off until you get the paternity test. It's very odd that she wouldn't want to have it done. Story 54. I am very confused as I was born with the ability to become pregnant rather than the ability to impregnate. Story 55. Here are the facts. You do not need your partner's consent to conduct a paternity test on your children. In fact, you do not even need their knowledge that you are having a paternity test. Therefore, your reaction is irrelevant and does not need to be a dramatic story. Many men believe they must go through a significant ordeal to find assurance and peace of mind regarding their doubts, which is understandable. Men do not simply wake up and think, "This child is not mine." Most accusations of infidelity stem from a series of suspicions that build enough to create doubt. Then, they feel the need to confront their partner and accuse her of cheating and lying. This is partly due to the strong pushback against paternity testing, which often includes gaslighting men who dare to question. To help men who do not know what to do, here are 3 options. 1. You can purchase an at-home test kit, swab yourself and the child, and optionally the mother, then mail the kit for results. This may take a few days to 2 weeks and can cost between $60 to $200. You can order a legal test backed by a court order. Courts work with accredited laboratories for DNA testing, including criminal investigations. You do not need court consent or even their knowledge to get a paternity test. There is a common misconception about this. You are protected by the legal term presumption of paternity, which means you are presumed to be the father and have the same rights as any father, regardless of whether your name is on the birth certificate. If you are at home caring for and feeding the child, you are presumed to be the father. Therefore, involving the courts should be your last resort. You have a right to request a paternity test by court order, but it is not legally mandatory. The judge can deny your request, though they are likely to accept it to protect their own liability. This option can cost up to $500. You can have a non-invasive test, which may be the quickest option. You go to a lab and they will draw blood from you and your child, providing results in 5 to 8 days. This can cost between $450 to $600. It used to be more complicated and possibly hazardous to the child to establish paternity in vitro. Now, there is a non-invasive option that can establish paternity as soon as the 7th week of pregnancy. There is free-flowing fetal DNA in the mother's plasma used for this purpose. The costs may vary, so it might be easier to wait until the child is born to conduct the test. More facts. DNA testing clinics across the country report that 30 to 40% of paternity tests yield negative results. This means about 1/3 of all paternity tests conducted are negative for establishing paternity. Approximately 32% of fathers who test may find that they are not the biological father. The American Association of Blood Banks has reported a similar statistic, with 28% of men testing negative for paternity. Remember, these figures only represent men who have chosen to take a paternity test due to justified suspicions. What do you think the percentage of paternity fraud would be if paternity DNA testing were mandatory? There is a significant stigma surrounding paternity testing precisely for this reason. 1/3 of men who test receive negative results. This indicates that a considerable number of women involved in these relationships where testing occurs may be committing paternity fraud, either knowingly or unknowingly. Researchers are beginning to be concerned about a potential epidemic of paternity fraud in the United States, but the stigma means it remains underreported. Despite the evidence, paternity fraud is not punishable by law in the United States. In other words, if you have spent your life raising another man's child while your spouse knew, you are left without recourse. Story 56. I would not have a child with someone I could not trust to be faithful, so it would not be an issue for me. Story 57. I'm going to be honest. If you doubt that you are the only one being intimate with your fiancé, you are in a difficult situation. Either she is being unfaithful or you are making false accusations, which also puts you in a problematic position. Story 58. A divorce and court order would suffice. 18 years is a long time to pay for someone else's mistake. Story 59. I would do it anyway. I just need the kid's input, I think. If you don't trust her, there should be ways to catch her. Story 60. I would be concerned because, for one thing, it is disrespectful. Her attitude is one of arrogance, suggesting that others should just trust her. Disrespect and arrogance can lead to cheating and unfaithfulness. Story 61. Paternity tests should be standard for all couples. Anyone who has an issue obtaining one is immediately suspect. Story 62. That means none of the children are yours, and you should check with a lawyer to ensure she doesn't cause you any issues when you leave. Story 63. After my ex and I decided to get a divorce, I got a DNA test for my 4-year-old son. He is mine. The number of instances of you are not, I would communicate that ahead of time, and if there is pushback from the woman, I would not continue dating her. I see many comments asking, you don't trust her? But the real question is, why would she refuse in the first place unless infidelity has occurred while you were together? It's a legitimate concern for men since once his name is on the birth certificate, they are basically stuck, even if they prove it's not their child later, at least in the US. It's a common theme on television of a white woman having a black baby with a white husband, usually made in an attempt at dark humor. If the woman has been faithful, it's a small request for a huge peace of mind for your relationship and family moving forward. You are going to have to deal with this since you already have a child and didn't set the precedent before your first that having a child with you requires a DNA test before birth. Best of luck. Story 64. Can you at least find out the blood type? It won't confirm that it's your child, but it could help disprove it. Story 65. 1. Conduct a paternity test for the child on your own. Regardless of the results, call off the wedding. You should not trust her if she is afraid of a paternity test. Separate from the woman immediately. End the relationship and collect evidence if you believe she has been with other men. Continue to support your child, even if you are not the biological parent, assuming that is the law in your country or state. The child is always innocent, so refrain from making a legal stand in this matter. If such support is not required by law, consult your conscience regarding your relationship with the child. Do not sign the second child's birth certificate. Avoid being present at the birth. Dispute the paternity of the second child. Require her to use the legal system to obtain a paternity test. If the second child is biologically yours, pay child support as required by law. Story 66. Just do it yourself. Order a kit and complete it without informing her. If she is refusing, then it is not your child. If it were, she would be eager to prove it. Story 67. I'm confused by your question because the person is the fiancé, but men can't get pregnant. It helps when you indicate which genders are you talking about, your fiancé or your paternity? Why are you engaged if you don't trust each other? That's a weak foundation on which to build any kind of relationship. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.